I think most of you probably have seen me before, but my name is Ariana and I'm one of the Climate Action Fund portfolio managers. I'm very pleased to say that we're having a few new faces here today. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to Yannick Swayze. Jan joined our team to replace Abby Dean as Climate Action Fund portfolio manager. It's her second day today with us. So I don't know, Jan, if you want to say hello or be seen.
Hi everyone. Thanks Ariana for introducing me. Hello to everyone. I'm here to listen and to hear about your amazing project. So yeah, lots to learn. Thank you.
Fantastic. Jans is an internal appointment from the England Directorate. She used to work for the multi-regional team, and she brings a wealth of experience in grant making, contract management, a lot of other skills. So we're all looking forward to working with her, and I'm sure you will join us to give her a big warm welcome today. Another update from TNLCF is, as many of you know, Nick Gardner moved to a fund-wide policy role, and Leeds Watchorn, who I'm sure most of you know, has been promoted to senior portfolio manager, and she's having the oversight of the portfolio going forward. So Liz is with us today. Nick, who will be joining us a little bit later, Nick Gardner, in his new role, he's leading on the environment deep dive, which forms part of TNLCF's strategy renewal. This is basically a process that will help us shape how we will continue to invest in communities in the next 5 years. And with climate change being considered as one of the greatest threats to humanity, this work, the environment deep dive, will help us to explore our role and that we can play as a funder in tackling it. And we do have a few people today from the deep dive, from the environment deep dive team. I can see Colleen, you'll meet some of them in your breakout rooms. So it will be, you may hear a little bit more about this work further down the line. A final update from us is that we are now scoping energy and energy efficiency as a new thematic priority for our open and responsive program. A thematic focus on energy is very timely. It will enable us to respond to concerns of communities for the rise in cost of living, and specifically uncertainties around volatility of energy markets. And we would love to fund a lot of initiatives that can demonstrate how can communities collectively respond to these issues. We are aware that lots of you have experience in this area, and there'll be opportunities to feed in the scoping exercise that is currently taking place. We will keep you posted as our thinking around this new priority evolves. We are thinking to launch that in the new year, probably around February, and we have commissioned a small piece of work to scope the wider kind of policy landscape. And if any learnings come out of this, we'll be sharing with you as well. Last but not least, you must have received already, or you're about to receive, a kind request from our comms team. We are currently building an image bank, and because we want to promote the Climate Action Fund program and the brilliant work that you're doing. We want to showcasing some of the kind of the projects that you are and the work that you're delivering. So it would be fantastic if you can share with us some high quality photos from your projects, so we can use them in our comms materials. And that's all from us. Enjoy your session. I don't know if Liz, you'd like to say hello or add anything to what I've already said. That'll be great.
Thanks so much, Ari. Just to say, it's so good to be here this morning. It's so lovely to see lots of familiar faces, but also lots of other faces that I've not met before. And Emma, that's phenomenal that we've had so many people sign up. That's absolutely brilliant. But yeah, no, just to say welcome, lovely to be here and looking forward to this morning and hearing more from you all.
Thanks so much, Liz and Ari, and a huge welcome to Yannick. Look forward to working with you. So I'm going to hand over now to my colleagues at MB Associates who work with us on the Support and Learning programme. So Emily's just going to give you a quick update from our end, I think.
Hi, morning everybody. Nice to see you all. Firstly, I just want to highlight some of the recent learning signposts that we've been doing over the summer and the kind of early autumn. So our most recent ones are engaging diverse communities, energy, and a partnership working. So I think Shona's going to pop the links in the chat to where you can find those on the OneDrive. Also just want to prompt you to use the partnership database. So we don't have permission to share your contact details with each other, but the partnership database allows you to do that. So you can voluntarily put your contact details on there. And that means that you can get in touch with other projects and people can get in touch with you. So it's an Excel sheet that you fill in, and Shona's popped the link to that in the chat as well. So the more people who use that, the better. It means that you guys can network with each other. But the best place to do that is Slack. So we know that lots of you are actively using that, but the more people who use it, the better that space will be. And we do take lots of the kind of themes that we work with from the conversations that are happening on there. So again, the more that is used, the better. You need to ask your National Lottery link person to give you access to that. We can't, at MB Associates and at CAG, we can't give you direct access. So you need to ask the National Lottery for access to that. And you can share that with all your partners as well. So please do encourage everybody working on your projects to use that space, because the more it's used, the more useful it is for everybody. And I think, yep, Shona's popped the link to how to use Slack and to get onto that space. There's a video and text how-tos on how to do that. So I think that's everything from us.
Brilliant, Emily. And Shona, if you just want to say a quick hello, Shona's the person who keeps an eye on Slack. If you ask a question on there that nobody answers, Shona will be monitoring that and trying to find somebody who can answer your question. So it's always nice to put a face to a name. So do you just want to quickly say hello, Shona?
Hi everyone, good morning. Yeah, nice to see some new faces today. Yeah, so just if you the link that I dropped in there, that's to the kind of centralised landing page, which can be found here. I just popped in the chat there. So if you go through there, you can access video tutorials like Emily's put together, and also a PDF document. And then there's my contact details as well. You do reach out to your individual manager grant officer to get access to Slack. And yeah, anything else I can help with, any one-to-one support, then please just reach out.
Brilliant. And yeah, just to reiterate, if you find Slack a bit overwhelming, I totally understand if that's the case, because I did too. Shona's very happy to provide support, so please don't be afraid to ask for that. And then just to introduce the other member of the team who's on this call, so Rona Pringle, who some of you will have come across. She's produced some of the learning outputs. Her top tip for keeping warm was Arctic boots. Are you wearing them at the moment, Rona? Can you give us a quick flash of an Arctic boot? Rona is also often to be found with a cat on her lap. Nice boots. Yeah, Rona's cat often makes an appearance. I saw there's another a few pet themed keeping warm tips actually. So Karen, who we'll be hearing from later, says getting the dog to run around the room a lot and warm the space up. I don't know whether she can put that into demonstrate that later when she's speaking. Brilliant. The only other thing from CAG to update you on is our mentoring program. So we run a program matching CAF mentors with mentees. We've just lined up the latest wave of mentors and mentees. So we've got 5 mentors working with 11 different mentees on different projects, or they're having their initial meetings. You should be having your initial meetings around now. And then if that all goes well, we'll be signing off on that and you get up to 3 days support from your mentor. So it's something we do in phases. So the next round is likely to be announced sometime next summer, but just something to be aware of. If you ever feel there's particular expertise and support that you could offer other projects, or there's something or some individual within your project who could really benefit from some mentoring, then bear that in mind. You can always let us know and we'll just put you on the list for the next round. Okay, so that's everything from us. And then the next delivery partner update is from Aggie Taylor at Social Change Agency. So over to you, Aggie.
Hi, thank you, Emma. Hello, everyone. I'm just wanting to introduce myself. My name is Aggie and I am new to the Social Change Agency, which is the movement building partner in CAF. To tell you a little bit about myself, I come from a youth movement background and have done a lot in capacity building and movement building within these spaces in Europe. I've also done a lot of project work in the climate justice movement and movement building in this area, focusing on enabling young people to enter intersectional climate spaces. I'm really excited to meet you all and to be part of CAF. I think I've seen some of you on the movement building training we in the Social Change Agency are running currently this month and next month. And I'm going to be running this training again in January and February. So we'll be getting in touch with all of you guys soon to arrange appropriate dates. I think the best way to do this on Slack. So as soon as I get on, I will contact you all, and yeah, looking forward to seeing lots of you in the future. If you have any questions or if you want to message me, I don't know if you can message me privately on Zoom. If not, I will put my email in the chat, and hopefully also see lots of you on Slack soon. So yeah, that's all from me. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Aggie, and great to have you on board as part of the team. So the next update is from Glimpse. So Glimpse are the content creation delivery partners for the Climate Action Fund, and they are going to be telling us, Ruth is going to be telling us about the project that they've had working with different funds, different projects to work with influencers. So over to you, Ruth.
Thanks, Emma, and morning, everybody. I'm Ruth, and as Emma said, I work with Glimpse, and we are the content creation support partner. I'm here with my colleague, Bat Saber, who's also going to be talking in a moment, and we're just going to give you a top-line rundown of a campaign we ran recently with some members of the cohort, and that was working with local influencers. We're also joined, really excitingly, by Gabby, who took part in the campaign. I can see Gabby waving. She's a content creator, and she worked with Dermot from the Camden Fixing Factory. So they're going to do a little 5-minute rundown of how the process was for them. So I'm just going to share my screen before handing over to my colleague. Let's see. Also, apologies, I'm in a co-work space, and I seem to have sat in the most busy location, so all these people walking past. I hope it's not distracting. Can everybody see my screen okay? Great. So as I said, our campaign was about working with influencers. And just very briefly, I hope you all know by now, but in case you don't, Glimpse, we are the content creation support partner, and we're basically a collective of creative people who use our skills for good. So we run campaigns with different NGOs and grassroots charities across the UK to basically try and provide a glimpse of a better world. So here's some pictures of some of the campaigns we've run previously. And we pitched this idea to the National Lottery and to the cohort about working with influencers. And in a nutshell, we wanted to find a way to reach beyond existing audience that CAF's groups might currently have by partnering them with local influencers to promote the amazing work they're doing in their community. So I'm now going to hand over to Bat Saber, who's just going to give it a rundown of who took part and what happened.
Thanks, Ruth. Okay, so 11 groups took part in the project or are currently taking part in the project. Not all collaborations have gone live yet. So yes, they're all listed on the screen, and I'll just start with basically introducing you to 4 collaborations that we've done. The first one was the one with Greener Kirkcaldy and Maxim Melishov. Maxim was sort of an amateur cook, and his Instagram page was mostly around him introducing creating new meals for his audience. So this collaboration with Greener Kirkcaldy was basically Maxim visiting Greener Kirkcaldy, visiting the community kitchen, and creating a 3-course climate-friendly meal using ingredients locally sourced or even from the Greener Kirkcaldy community kitchen. The second collaboration was Repowering London and Tyrese Johnson Fisher. Tyrese, or TJ, he is a professional athlete in rugby and also American football. And he was very interested in the project, especially because it was youth oriented and was basically based in sort of marginalized estates around London. So he visited one of Repowering London's training programs and sort of created content around that as well. The next collaboration we have to showcase is the New You collaboration with Imogen Scolding. Imogen, she'd already known about New You because she's very interested. Her Instagram is mostly around sustainable fashion, so she knew about New You. So it was an easy collaboration to make. And she basically visited New You and showed you know, how the circular economy works and how you can go about shopping with New You. And then the last one is the Camden Fixing Factory and Gabby Young. And as Ruth mentioned, they're both here with us today just to talk about the collaboration in a bit more detail. So yes, I won't speak too much, and sort of I'll hand it over to both Gabby and Dermot, who are here today.
Thanks, Sada. Sorry, can I just jump in super quick? I forgot to say that we are running a session later on today on this because this is super top line. So I just wanted to say that we will be able to go into more detail and answer more questions later if you're interested. And I think, Gabby, you're going to stick around for that as well, aren't you?
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Hi, everyone. It's really exciting to be a part of this. Dermot, are you there as well?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, wonderful. Do you want to
start
and talk about Camden Fixing Factory?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't got much time. So, I mean, Camden Fixing Factory is a community hub for fixing. It's a bit like giving a repair cafe a permanent home. I think that's a very simple way to put it. And I'm going to try and go through the questions that I got quickly about how we agreed on the content, which is basically Gabby and I had a chat on the phone. I had no idea. I really know very little about influencing or much about social media. But we decided it'd be good to come along to one of our community fixing sessions because it's out in the market. There's always a lot going on, people coming and going. And Gabby had a steam iron, and the idea was that she'd bring that along. It was misbehaving. We bring it along, try and diagnose it. However, when we tried to film during the community fixing session, it was just too busy with too many people asking me questions, and I kind of have to oversee it. So Gabby really graciously, she got some great footage and she photographed some stuff and then sort of bowed out and said, I'll come back and do it another time. So we reconvened in the workshop with just the two of us with the same steam iron, but it wouldn't exhibit the fault. So we kind of went through and couldn't really get it to misbehave. So we pivoted and basically did a tear down of an iron that was already in the workshop. So Gabby's got a kind of a time lapse film of that, which is terrific. And I think it went really well. And so I think one of the interesting things is that it's about creating the content, it's not documentary. So Gabby was really focused. We've got to get something, and she had it in her mind. She kind of always had this view of what the end edit would look like, which is kind of, I take my hat off for that. I didn't quite understand the sort of magic behind that, but I could sort of see it in action. And always ready to go. Actually, I don't think this is going to quite work. Let's do something. And it went really well. And I think we gained about 30 new followers on our tiny Instagram account, which is exciting for us. And I think we're going to take it and try and nurture our own micro influencers. So get local people, and I don't know if Gabby will probably maybe support, but I think that's kind of our plan. Yeah, and great to work with someone who's kind of just got vastly more experience in the area. And what was your experience, Gabby?
Oh, thank you, Dermot. That means a lot. Well, I'm so pleased that you've had such a positive impact from it. For me, Batsaber got in touch and said, you know, that she's looking for an influencer that cares about the local community, is in this kind of field. I mean, it's quite a niche, the fixing factory field. But because I'm a seamstress and I'm very much part of the sewing and craft community, and I'm also DIY enthusiast and everything, it fit in really well with me. And straight away I was like, oh, you know what we really need is a sewing machine to fix. But actually my sewing machine was behaving at the time. So so we went with an iron, which is again a very important part of sewing. And yeah, it was quite funny that then it stopped. It actually worked perfectly for the first time in months when I got to you. But we pivoted and we found another iron to take apart. And I think it was just a really lovely thing to be a part of, because I'm really passionate about our planet and the local community. And I felt really honoured to have that opportunity.
Amazing.
Thanks, Gabby. I wanted to just jump in it now as well, just to say that we have also put together a Working with Influencers handbook, which is going to be available on the CAF OneDrive for everyone to access, and we can nudge that on Slack. But that basically goes through the process of sort of start to finish, how to identify influencers in your area, how to contact them, collaborate, you know, the kind of posts that you might be interested in making yourself in the future. And BatSaber's sort of been updating that with reflections on how the collaborations have gone for us. So Emma, I know that the time is precious. Are we okay to run our poll?
Yeah, absolutely. We're 3 minutes ahead of schedule, which is
amazing.
Miraculous.
Unless there's anything else that Gabby and Dermot wanted to say. I know that you're going to be in the session later and have a bit more detail. But yeah, on top of the campaign work that we do with the cohort, we also offer training. So last February, we ran various sessions, and we are going to be doing another tranche of training in February of 2023. And we just wanted to use this opportunity to see if what you guys would like to hear more about. So Emma's put the poll up, and we'd love you to choose up to 3 areas that you're interested in, just so we can get some insight there. And then there's also a box to say if there's anything else you'd like to receive training on, and we'll try and facilitate that next year.
And I can see people filling in that poll at the moment. And perhaps, I don't know whether Gabby and Dermot, whether you'd like to share your Instagram handles, perhaps via the chat. It would be lovely to see all the projects. I've just followed both of you, very exciting. But it'd be lovely, I think, for projects that do have Instagram accounts, you know, for you all to be connected with each other, so you can see what everybody's doing and, you know, help amplify everybody's messages. So just give you a couple more minutes to fill in the poll, and then I'll just share the results so that Ruth can see what everyone's going for. At the moment, it's looking like everything's quite popular, basically. Yeah, if you had to sum it up, it would be everything, please.
Thanks, Emma. And I also just say we can put links to the actual videos in the Slack channel as well, because we didn't have time on this 10-minute presentation to show you the videos and the photos and details, but we'll make sure they're up there after this call.
So I can see there are still answers coming in, so I don't want to end it prematurely. So I'll just read out the answers for you, Ruth, so you can just see. So the most popular at the moment, 71% of the votes going to writing and framing effective climate messaging, and then developing your brand, 14 people would like that. Organic digital strategy with 13, writing a press release, 11, paid digital strategy with 8, and various other suggestions, which I'll share with you after today. So I think everybody has completed that now, so I will close that now. So thank you so much, Ruth, and also BatSaber and Dermot and Gabby, for telling us about that project. And as they explained, there is, if you're interested in that, we're about to go into we'll be going into the breakout groups after the next set of presentations. And basically, as you listen to each presentation, you're going to have the hard task of choosing one of them to go into a breakout group. So unfortunately, I know one of the common pieces of feedback we get is, I wanted to do all the breakouts. But then another piece of feedback will be that a whole day session is too long. And unfortunately, we can't really magically answer both of those. So you'll have to choose a breakout to go into, and that will be after the next set of presentations, but we will be capturing feedback, and we'll be sharing slides from those breakouts with everybody. Okay, so the next set of presentations, we've got 4 presentations from different Climate Action Fund projects. We've asked each of them to give you a 10-minute presentation. It's like a show and tell, a taster of what they're learning, what are their key learnings that they'd like to share with others in the cohort. So a huge thank you to the 4 projects who volunteered. And if you would like to volunteer in future, do please drop us a note. We're always thinking about the design of the next session. So do let me know if you think you've got something that others would benefit from hearing about. So our first presentation is from Bristol, and it's Amy Harrison and Emma Geen doing a joint presentation, particularly focusing on their work with Bristol's community of disabled people. So I think, Amy, you're going to kick it off.
I am. Hi, everybody. I'm just having that issue of not being able to go full screen because of where my if I do that, hopefully everybody can see that. So
Perfect.
Great. Sorry about that. Morning, everyone. So hello, yeah, Amy from Bristol here, and me and my wonderful colleague Emma are going to be doing a little bit of tag teaming, so you have to bear with us because we've got to switch screens in between. So just a bit of a recap on our project here in Bristol. We just finished. We had a stage 1 development project for the last 2 years where we were working with diverse communities to co-produce community climate action plans, and we were very fortunate to get investment in a further phase, a further 3 years of funding to expand and develop our project. So we have got a very strong focus on working with diverse communities, and Emily mentioned earlier about that fairly new signposting document. So we fed into that, and it was on the back of that that we volunteered to be involved this morning to share a little bit of our work, but particularly focusing on some of Emma's fantastic work with, by and for the disabled community. But I'm just going to give you a tiny little bit of context of the holistic project. So in essence, we're obviously working with communities to take action on climate, but we've got a very strong focus on also sort of simultaneously taking action on structural inequality. We are very, very strongly trying to develop and promote climate leadership from communities, and really sort of trying to celebrate and capacity build leadership on climate from diverse communities. So some of those communities that have long been excluded or not had a necessarily strong platform or voice and agency in the climate conversation. So as I said, in the first phase, our big chunky piece of work that we're working on is the co-development, co-production of community-led climate action plans, and we launched 6 of those back in the spring, and a very strong co-production process underpinning all of the work we do. We've got some ways of working documents and things that we can share around that, and celebrating and promoting the diversity of our city. And just a little bit on who is involved in the project. So we were very specific right at the beginning about the sort of selection process, really wanting to make sure that us as the lead of the project, Bristol Green Capital Partnership, working with the City Council and with CSE, who are energy specialists, when we were selecting the communities that were involved in this, that they weren't the usual suspects that had been involved in, you know, some of the more in lobbying and climate conversations in the city. So we're working with 4 geographic communities, and they are all communities experiencing complex and multiple deprivation. One of those is a very diverse inner city neighbourhood, and the other 4 are very much sort of fringe communities that are established sort of old working class, predominantly council estate areas. And then also working with 2 demographic communities who obviously spread out across the city. So working with Bristol Disability Equalities Forum, with Bristol's Community of Disabled People, and with ACH, who are working with the refugee and migrant community in the city. And we will be in the second phase of our project, we're going to be expanding that work. So we'll be supporting another 12 communities, and we hope we'll be able to expand that representation of the city's amazing diversity even further through doing that. And in terms of platforming and giving sort of strategic influence to diverse communities, we're going to be establishing a new city leadership panel for communities on climate and just transition. But now, without any further ado, I would like to hand over to my fantastic colleague, Emma, who has been doing some pioneering work in Bristol and beyond, nationally and soon to be internationally as well, to talk a bit more in detail about the work they've been doing with Bristol's community of disabled people. Over to you, Emma.
Thanks for that lovely introduction, Amy. Yes, so as Amy's been saying, we're the Bristol Disability Equality Forum, and we work with disabled people across Bristol. Yeah, so on this slide, you'll see a picture of the sofa, which I was dragging around the streets of Bristol kind of mid-pandemic as part of our co-production exercise. But yeah, so on to the first slide. So yeah, as Amy said, the project's particularly working with a lot of communities that tend to be excluded from the climate conversation. That's certainly the case with disabled people. In fact, the Community Climate Action Plan, which we produced for this project, is the first of its type by and for disabled people in the world, which I always say, you know, is something that I'm proud of, but I think actually more points towards, you know, the disgraceful kind of lack of inclusion of disabled people in the movement, rather than, you know, us being particularly special. And this is particularly important because disabled people are recognised by the UN as one of the groups that are most at risk of climate change. So there's a whole bunch of reasons behind that related to poverty and that kind of thing, but also we are twice as likely than any other group to be killed or hurt by disasters. And obviously those are going to increase with increasing extreme weather created by climate change and these kinds of things. So we're a very vulnerable group in the face of this crisis. But we can also be really hurt by careless mitigation and adaptation plans that don't think about our needs. So, you know, being at the table is really essential for us to make sure that these problems don't arise. So there's so many ways in which this can happen, but I tend to focus on the example of the plastic straws for this one because most people have heard about it. So the plastic straw ban, I think a lot of people kind of herald that as a kind of great success for environmentalism in the UK, but really when you kind of look at the stats, I think it reduced ocean plastic by about 0.02% by weight. But plastic straws were actually created as a medical device to stop liquid from deteriorating in the lungs of people with certain needs. Before they were, you know, people were sticking them in their Starbucks or anything like that. So really, the ban hasn't actually really solved the problem in any meaningful way, but created a whole new barrier for people who are already facing so many barriers in society. I've also put the clean air zone here just because that's an issue we've been having to protest about recently in Bristol in terms of obviously hugely in support of that, but the way it's being created is going to, you know, I hope not, but could trap some disabled people in their homes and that kind of thing. So these kinds of environmental schemes, if they aren't created in just ways and disabled people aren't included at the table, can create a huge amount of problems in our community. I think sometimes people say like, oh, you know, but it's such an emergent crisis, you know, we can't really, you know, we have to rush whatever the impact on some, you know, some elements of our communities. But when you look at it, disabled people, we're 22% of the population. We're the biggest minority group. And, you know, when you think about it, how do we reach net zero if 22% of your population physically can't take the actions that are needed to be sustainable? So I think it's not just a just transition issue, but a transition issue in general. We also call, at our charity, we often call non-disabled people the not yet disabled to highlight the fact that most people become disabled in their lifetime, whether that's temporarily or, you know, as you get older. I think as the stats kind of vary a little bit, but I think as a bottom level in the over 85-year-old category, you've got at least 44% of people being disabled. So, you know, as the changes that we're making to our societies now are going to be with us, you know, essentially for the rest of our lives. And so basically, more or less, everyone is going to need them to be accessible, whether that's sooner, you know, today or whether that's in, you know, 20 years time. So this is, you know, making sure this is just is really important for everyone, not just people who are disabled now. And lastly, it's really important because disabled people also have a huge amount of expertise that we can bring. We're not just victims. We've also got a huge amount of knowledge that's really essential here. I often talk about a young disabled girl you might have heard of. So she was so passionate about climate change that she started walking out of her school and sitting in front of her local parliament, and within a year being nominated for a Nobel Peace Award and had a movement of millions, because of course that disabled person is Greta Thunberg. So as disabled people, to be disabled is to live in a society where there's kind of systems are set up to sort of to exclude you. They're kind of you don't fit them. They are unfriendly, they are ever changing, and so you become really good at adapting to them. And I think one of the things that we're going to see increasingly with climate change is a world that is, you know, unfriendly and unsafe for people, and is going to need that kind of, you know, huge amount of adaptation. And I think disabled people have a huge amount of that insight and knowledge to know how to do that work. So yes, what we did lots of co-production. We reached out to disabled people as many different ways as possible. We had a video. We had various different we got experts and disabled people together to discuss solutions, because I think one of the problems with doing this work was the fact that because we've been excluded for so long, there's just not really other projects that we could look to and say, oh, you know, these are potential solutions. We had to kind of really make them from the ground up. So we had sessions like this picnic where we got experts on specific issues together with disabled people, discuss potential solutions to ways in which we could be reducing emissions at the same time as producing good things for disabled people. And we had a survey in various forms. And from that, we created our Community Climate Action Plan. And in there, we have a whole range of asks to the city about how they can make their climate work accessible, and some kind of projects that we want to do ourselves. And I just put on the pictures there, as well as the picnic, our Easy Read booklet, because it's really important to make sure that this work is done in a fully accessible way so that everyone can read it. I'm aware I'm running out of time a bit, so I'll rush through this, but please go and have a look at the plan and see some of the asks about how we think that work can be accessible. But our projects, we're going to be starting a repair hub to take mobility aids out of the waste stream and refurbish them for onward sale for disabled people at affordable prices, and sort of teaching disabled people how to maintain their own equipment. We've also we just hired an energy champion and going to hire a transport champion to work with disabled people and researchers and policy makers on those particular issues, because they're so important to disabled people. We're also going to hoping to do action on food and creating a reference group of disabled people with kind of impairments across the board to make sure that we can have that kind of really in-depth knowledge or input into how we can make sure that climate plans are accessible in Bristol. But yeah, we're really grateful to...
One more minute, Emma. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, we're really grateful to the lottery for money for the repair head and champions. So thanks so much for that. But yeah, I will just wrap up now. Like, sorry, I can go on for hours talking about this, so I'll just wrap up there. But here's my email and our contact information. That's I think Amy's been putting links into chat for go and read the plan. But also in there we've got a guide about how protests can be made accessible for disabled people as well, because I think it's really important as well that we are given the space to have our voice heard and to be part of this movement towards making our future and our planet accessible and sustainable. So thank you very much.
Huge thanks, Emma and Amy. Really inspiring presentation. And yes, a particularly big thank you to Emma for joining us while she's on holiday, which is going above and beyond. Lots of links shared in the chat. We will be sharing all those links afterwards as well. We'll email round to everybody with those links, but huge thanks to both of them. And then on to our next project, Show and Tell. So it's over next to John Forbes and Karen Mitchell to tell us about Zero Carbon Cumbria. And you should now be able to share your screen. So I think John's going to start. Karen's going to start. We'll keep an eagle eye out for Karen's dog and see whether he is in fact warming up the room. Over to you, Karen.
He's not doing a lot to warm up the room at the moment. Brilliant. Thank you so much. That was really inspiring, actually, to hear about what's happening in Bristol. Thank you. So yes, I'll kick off and then I'll hand over to John, who's the Zero Carbon Cumbria programme manager. Starting at the top, in Cumbria, we have something called the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership. So this is around 80 plus organisations from the third sector, the private sector and the public sector. We think find it's really, really important having this diversity of organisations in this group. And the group has basically committed to planning the pathway to net zero for Cumbria by 2037. It's been particularly important having the community sustainability groups in the same room as local authorities to both challenge and influence, and also to help those two sometimes polarized groups to learn how to work together and how to collaborate. we're moving now into specifically working on how to work around contentious issues where community sustainability groups might have a very different viewpoint and approach to where a local authority might be coming from. So we've got a bit of work to do there to ensure we keep everybody in the room. This diversity of groups is reflected in the chairing. So the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership is chaired by myself and by the Executive Director for Economy and Infrastructure from Cumbria County Council. So that's the kind of context to set us off on this journey with the National Lottery, because on behalf of that partnership and in collaboration with 10 of the partners, we put a bid into CAF and we're very pleased to secure 2.5 million for a programme, a 5-year programme of work to help us get to net zero by 2037. So that programme of action is all about broadening and deepening engagement. So going beyond our usual suspects, it's about building capacity in communities and other organisations to respond to climate change. It's about giving communities and young people a very strong voice in decision making. It's about joining up climate change projects across the county and beyond, sharing intelligence. And it's also about ensuring all of that activity and momentum and passion and engagement adds up to more than the sum of its parts and actually influences what we call the gatekeepers of emissions to ensure that we can actually lock in action on climate change into policies and investments and funding across Cumbria. So one of the developments that I think has really helped us strategically with this fairly massive project actually is setting out our story of change, which has enabled us to describe how the 16 or so CAF funded projects actually hang together. So I'll just quickly whiz through this, starting with engagement. So engagement was one of the many projects that we've got underway under this Zero Carbon Cumbria banner. Will improve knowledge, might improve skills, might change attitudes, influence values, help motivate people to take action. That in turn sort of builds capability, capacity, and agency. And that will lead and does lead to individual behaviour change, to organisational behaviour change, to the influencing of key decisions, and to improve leadership on climate change. And as a result of that, the outcomes that we're seeing is the new social norms, new ways of working, locking in that change, leading to carbon emission reductions and the heap of wonderful co-benefits that we're all so familiar with. That comes from tackling carbon emissions, the clean air, the savings on energy bills, the warmer homes, the more active travel, the better health. So some of our projects might trigger just some of those outcomes. Other projects might go all the way through that journey of change. And we've also got the cumulative effect of all the projects that we're leading on. So I mentioned 16 projects. They fall into kind of 6 key areas, starting from the top, the further development of the partnership. You know, it's a lot of organisations, and we really need to invest in resourcing that and keeping the momentum going around that partnership, keeping the partners in the room. We've got a very broad, diverse training and skills programme. We've got obviously a key cornerstone of all of this is the community-led climate action, all sorts of wonderful things happening, from low carbon food to repair cafes to community renewable energy to local food growing. So there's a lot of support there to strengthen that network and sharing between community groups in Cumbria. We're developing a reporting and evaluation framework. We've got quite a comprehensive youth climate action programme, and we've also got specific support in there for local authorities. Alongside, we have a load of activity around communications, and do please check out our new shiny website. There's a heap of information on there, and that bringing all of this to bear so that we can influence those gatekeepers of emissions and ensure we're locking in that lasting change. I'm just going to run through some of the the sort of strategic things that have been really particularly important in delivering this project. So we put in place a strategic oversight board for that wider partnership of 80+ organisations. So this is a small group of senior executives from key organisations in Cumbria. So that includes the Lake District National Park, Cumbria Tourism, the educational sector, the local authorities, a representative for the project delivery partners, and the co-chairs of Zero Carbon Cumbria. And we have an independent interim chair in this first year, sort of managing that SOB, that strategic oversight board. And that group is providing the strategic leadership of the partnership, ensuring really good governance, ensuring and tracking progress, and helping to seek resources. And that's really, I think, helped the momentum of the wider partnership. And it's really brought that senior engagement into the partnership. Secondly, in 2019, the partnership commissioned a carbon baseline report for Cumbria that identified the carbon emissions that we can most influence, that we have most control over. And that gave us a target of 7 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent, and gave us a scenario for how to get there by 2037. So it illustrates the scale of the reductions needed and where those reductions could most reasonably be made. We're currently going through the process of updating that baseline to include emissions that weren't counted before, because we didn't have enough data to do that, and to take into account some more accurate data around peat bogs and sequestration of carbon. That is resulting to some changes in the numbers, and it is going to be more challenging to get to net zero by 2037. But we've always looked at consumption emissions. We've always built that into our model. So we've always been ambitious, and we're really determined to maintain that ambition to get to net zero by 2037. And I think what we find is that for some people, it's really important to see these figures. They see it as a bit of an accounting exercise. For others, it's not that important. It's just about making radical reductions in emissions as quickly as possible, and as far as possible. The other thing that we've got is sector groups. These are smaller groups of specialists who are getting together to figure out the carbon emission reduction pathway on land use, transport, buildings, and sort of waste and consumption. So these are effectively volunteers that we've recruited in to do this job. They're kind of doing it as part of their day job or alongside their day job. And there has been a bit of a challenge there in terms of ensuring progress. We've just been reviewing the sector groups, the membership of them, the stakeholder engagement by the groups. We've looked at similar initiatives, zero carbon planning done on a county basis in other parts of the country. And we've now created planning templates for those sector groups. We're tightening up the scope for them. But what we really need is actually to find dedicated paid support to help coordinate the sector groups and really sort of facilitate the capturing of these sometimes quite complicated carbon emission reduction plans. So that's a focus for our work coming up.
Karen, there's just a minute left of your 10 minutes.
Gosh,
and I know it's
I've still got to hand over to John.
To avoid me, if I can give John 5 minutes, but I don't know if you're able to move on yet. Thank you so much.
Just very quickly, youth panel, we want to be challenged strategically by young people. So we're setting up a panel, and we will bring them into the work of the Strategic Oversight Board to bring that impatience of youth to bear on us. I'm so sorry, John. I'll quickly skip over that one and hand straight to you to go into more detail on the project.
Thanks, Karen. I'll try and go through these last slides as quickly as possible. So one of the projects working particularly well is the climate literacy training, and we've just reached this milestone of over 1,000 people trained, which is just brilliant. It's very encouraging to hear that as well as improving delegates' knowledge of climate change, they feel more empowered to raise the importance of climate action in their work as well as their personal lives. Next slide, Karen. As you'll be aware, community-led climate action through the Cumbria Sustainability Network is a particularly important aspect of our project. The CSN coordinator is working well in helping to support the development of this network. And we also have the grant fund, which part of our project, we've allocated just under £35,000 to support 15 projects, a wide range of different activities. And this funding has levered in an additional £22,000 of additional funding. So there's over £55,000 of investment in these projects. Next slide, Karen. We're also successful in securing some additional funding from the Climate Coalition with the aim of broadening engagement. We used our experience of running the Community Climate Grant Fund to allocate this funding to support a number of local events as part of this year's Great Big Green Week. There were around 30 events or so last year, so we're delighted that there were more than 90 events this year. We've written a short report on this year's events we'd be very happy to share. And we've learned that even relatively small amounts of funding can be really significant in helping voluntary groups cover the cost of such events. And also learned that the capacity of voluntary groups is finite and we have to be careful to avoid volunteer burnout. Next slide, Karen. One of the other projects working very well is the local food project delivered by our partner Vista Veg. You'll probably know that Cumbria is well known for its livestock. However, Vista Veg are working with 4 local growers to grow a range of vegetable crops in the county. They took some of their produce to grow a range of to Kendal Farmers Market earlier this summer and were delighted it all sold out. And one of the lessons we've learned from this project is the challenge of using public procurement to stimulate demand for locally supplied food. And Vista Veg are liaising with our local authority climate coordinator to try and address this issue. It's a great example of where we've been able to make links across different elements of our project. Next slide. Another project working well is our Youth Climate Action Programme. We've held 2 successful youth climate summits, as well as feeding the views of young people into the Copeland's People's Panel. We've learned young people can be very powerful advocates of climate action, but there's also concern about eco-anxiety, particularly amongst young people who want to see more action more quickly. Next slide. As Karen mentioned, we're developing our reporting evaluation framework, learned it could be difficult to develop a single framework which can apply to all aspects of our project. As an example, even the definition of indicators such as beneficiaries may vary depending on the kind of activity. We therefore learned it's best to develop a bespoke framework for each project within an overall structure. And the final slide, Karen. Just to say, over the last 2 years, we've gained lots of experience and have had lots of examples of things which are working well and lessons which we've learned, some of which are shown on this slide. We very much look forward to discussing these with you in more detail during the breakout session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John and Karen, and apologies for hustling you along. It's a huge and very complex and very impressive project, and it's almost impossible to get the highlights into 10 minutes. So just bear in mind, if you are interested in knowing more about any of those, so things like carbon literacy, which I know has been a topic on Slack quite a lot, do join that breakout group. And I think that piece about procurement is really interesting because that's often identified as a barrier and a challenge to overcome. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to move on to the next project, another of the round 1 delivery projects, another big and very complex project involving lots of stakeholders. So Climate Action Leeds and Sarah Bradley Adams is going to give us some of the highlights of their first 2 years. So over to you, Sarah.
Hi, thank you very much. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Bradley Adam. I'm Project Coordinator at Voluntary Action Leeds on Climate Action Leeds. And I'm going to now share my slides with you. Here we are. So can everybody see? Yeah.
Yes. Are you able to go into full slide? We can see the present. Perfect. Thank you.
Is that it? Okay. Okay. So we have just come to the end of year 2 of a 5-year project of Climate Action Leeds. And Climate Action Leeds is a citywide project, and our aim is to create a net zero, nature-friendly, more socially just Leeds by the 2030s. In common with some of the other projects that have spoken this morning, particularly Zero Carbon Cumbria, we have a lot of stakeholders and a lot of different groups involved in delivering that project. So we have citywide movement building through community-led climate action. So we have 8 transition partners. I think some in Zero Carbon Cumbria, you spoke about the sector partners. The transition partners that we have at Climate Action Leeds are similar. These work on a sector-wide level across entry points like transport, work and economy, youth, education, and food and nature, among others. So they work across sectors and networks and also lend knowledge and expertise to the community hubs. During the development phase, 8 community hub areas were identified. So we have 8 climate action community hubs in different parts of Leeds. So these are in different, very different areas of Leeds. Some of them are in former industrial areas, some are in some are in more affluent areas, some are in very diverse areas. There's a real mix of different places that were identified as community hub areas. So some of those community hubs for us are in their second year and some are just starting. The other thing that's really important to mention about the community hubs is that they all work with a locally trusted organisation. So in Seacroft, the hub there work with a charity called the LS14 Trust, who have been working in the area a long time. And the locally trusted organisation act as a host organisation for one of the workers, but they also help with networks, local knowledge, and just support the work of those community climate action hubs. As well, in the community hubs, they are community led, so it's the local community that get involved in them that directs the direction that the community hubs take. So they're all very different. Throughout the Climate Action Leeds year, there are plenty of opportunities for people to network and to communicate with one another. Our climate assemblies, which we hold twice a year, are a larger event which aim to bring in the wider networks and the general public into climate action, so people can attend the climate assemblies, find out more about what's happening within Climate Action Leeds. People who are working in volunteer-led groups can come along to those assemblies, and that's an opportunity for people to make networks and connections with one another and to join together to make a larger movement. Our community hub organisation run an online network group, which is for anyone that's working in a community climate action group anywhere in Leeds that's not funded as part of Climate Action Leeds. They're just working anywhere in the city. And again, the aim there is to lend support and offering network opportunities for those groups. The sector partners hold regular sector events. So a couple of weeks ago, I went to a really good energy cafe, which was held by our energy partner. And that is looking at what is energy, what is the reality of energy in Leeds now, and what would you like it to look like? Those are World Cafe events, which are for the local community to understand what's happening, where they want things to go, and then that contributes to advocating for change on a citywide level. Some of the transition partners are further along in this process than others. So, for example, our food sector transition partner has been working in the city a long time. So they've done a lot of community-led work, and they're a lot further along in this process than other sector partners that are run by individuals or by newer organisations. And we do also have a climate justice approach. We have a climate justice supporting partner, the Racial Justice Network, and we aim to have a climate justice approach through everything that we do. Does everyone know about climate justice and what climate justice is? Or shall I speak about that a little bit?
Maybe just a quick word, Sarah. I know there's been a debate on in one of the coffee mornings about what it means and how it means different things to different people. So maybe just very briefly would be useful. Thanks.
Yes. So in terms of climate justice, and this has been discussed at the most recent COP conference as well, I think, that the countries who produce the most carbon are the countries and the areas that are least affected by it. Countries that produce and areas of the world that produce less carbon are much more affected by climate change, and they're being affected by it now. So one of the things we look to do is to give marginalised communities a voice in everything that we do, and to think about how everything we do doesn't place the burden unnecessarily on other people to fix the problems. You know, that the countries who produce the carbon and we are not adding to that problem of generating carbon that affects other parts of the world more. So just to move on to some of the collaborative aspects of our work, Climate Action Leeds is a large citywide project. There are lots of different stakeholders. One of the great benefits of that is that it allows our partners and community hubs to contribute to one another, to lend each other expertise and support. So some really good examples of this are in Seacroft, one of our community hub areas. They have a forest garden, which is an edible garden with fruit trees on a piece of land that used to be a bit of waste ground. Our housing partner helped this local area who wanted to have a local green area and a local forest garden to them, helped them find and secure this area that wasn't being used, that could then be developed into an edible garden. The community-led work is led by volunteers. So this desire for a forest garden and edible garden in the local area was very much led by the wishes of local volunteers who didn't have a lot of green space close to them, because there's not a lot of green space in this particular area of Leeds, and for them to be able to grow food locally. So it was very much led by the wishes of the local communities, this project. In terms of what the transition partners do, we have a really good transition partner for nature called Hyde Park Source. They were able to provide, make links with a local business that do volunteering days for their employees. So they have done a couple of really big work days where they've helped clear the space and to make paths in this garden. It was one of those big tasks that needed a lot of labour over a short period of time to deliver it. The forest garden otherwise is maintained by a small group of volunteers, and things like clearing the whole space and keeping it clear is a big task for them. So to have access to this this corporate volunteering day was a huge help for them. The other thing that the nature transition partners did in the forest garden was they supported these local volunteers to apply for a grant, which enabled them to bring in a forest garden expert who was able to help deliver a training day about how to continue developing the design of their forest garden and improve it. That was a really big help to the volunteers to have that expertise there, and they were able to win it with this funding that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to access. Another really good example was the Little London Clean Air Cafe. Little London's an area of, it's one of the low out, what in Leeds they call a super low output area. So it's quite a deprived area of Leeds. The hub worker there collaborated with the transport transition partners to deliver an event called the Clean Air Cafe in a local community centre. So local people could come, they could get their tea. This was done at sort of school kick-out time. So as schools finished, people could come to the Clean Air Cafe. There was a seed planting table, a poet who gave a presentation, and there was also a free bike fix event. So local people could come and get their bike fixed. They could also contribute to the visioning of what they want the future of Leeds clean air to look like. They could also plant plants, edible plants, and get together with their community to form the starting point of a steering group for that local area. How am I doing for time?
1 more minute, Sarah.
1 more minute, okay. So that was a really positive way. It's a part of one of the things that we found through offering community-led work in different parts of Leeds is that there is more infrastructure in certain parts of Leeds than others, and certain parts of Leeds where people have more free time to contribute. One of the really positive benefits of offering these community hubs is that it's helping to develop infrastructure in some parts of Leeds that didn't have it before, and I would say that Little London is one of those areas. So as we're running out of time, I think I'll just have to skip a little bit, but I just want to show you some photos. This is from the Little London Clean Air Cafe. You can see the poet there giving the presentation, reading some poems, some people from the local area, and this lady by the table is the London Clean Leeds running mare. So that was the visioning table. And this is a photo of the Forest Garden on the Forest Garden Design Day. These are some of the local volunteers that take care of the garden. And this chap to the right in with the dark clothes and the hat is the Roots Rackman Rack, who was there to teach them about forest garden design. So that was a really positive day that everyone got a lot out of. We also have a Leeds City Donut, which is a citywide approach to how we approach all the work that we do. I'll drop the link to that in the chat. But some of the effects of what Climate Action Leeds is doing already is that we're encouraging people to contribute to the Leeds food strategy, which has been developed by our food transition partner and partners within the council, and contributing to ensuring that Leeds is zero carbon in terms of how the council procures its food for events, and that there is more local growing space. So these are really important strands in the food strategy as a whole now that's going out to consultation in the city, and that's because of the input of our food partner. We also are involved in supporting the Leeds City Plan update, which looks at how the city itself is planned. So that's really important. One really nice thing is that one of our community workers in Beeston is an energy saving expert, so they've produced a print version of an energy saving handbook which tells people how to save money on their bills and what they can do to keep their homes warm, and that has got a real world impact for people now, because it's a thing that a lot of people are concerned about. So that's really relevant to that local area, and it's something that can be more available to people in the city as a whole, because we have an e-version that can go on the website. And the last thing is that our nature partners are contributing quite heavily to a piece of work around ensuring that the process for local people to get access to land for growing food is easier and simpler, and that more people can do it. So that's an ongoing piece of work that will hopefully move on as we go through the project. So that I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And again, I know it's an enormous project to try and fit into 10 minutes. And it's always a very challenging juggle with these events, giving enough time for presentations and the breakouts, and also not eating too much into tea and coffee breaks. So huge thanks to Sarah. And then last but not least, in our show and tell sessions, Natasha Parker from Global Action Plan is going to tell us about their Schools Good Life Charter project. So 10 minutes for Natasha, and I will let you know when you've got 1 minute left so that we don't lose our coffee break. Thanks, Natasha. You should be able to share.
Thank you. I think someone else is still sharing.
Yes.
Oh,
Sarah,
sorry, that's me. Sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. Just a sec.
No, don't worry. Don't know whether I can unshare it for you.
Can you unshare it for me? There's something odd happening with my Zoom and I can't. Hang on. There we are.
There we go.
There we go. There we go. Fine. I will share mine now. 1 second. Okay. Everyone see that? Okay.
Perfect.
Everyone hear me okay as well? Good. Excellent. Okay, I'll try and whiz through this and keep it short. Yeah, just so many inspiring projects happening, and I can already see lots of links with what we're doing. So excited for the sessions where we get together. So I'm going to talk to you about our Schools Good Life Charter. So I work for a charity called Global Action Plan. We're an environmental charity, and we received money from CAF to go into schools. So just to give you a little bit of background to the project, so essentially where we're coming from is trying to address the issue of excessive consumption, as it's of course a major driver of climate breakdown. We in the global north are consuming far too much stuff. And this is not only just causing damage to the climate and to our planet, but also young people. We do a lot of work with young people, and they've told us of the damage to their self-esteem from the incessant advertising that they are receiving, both online and offline. And so we wanted to go into schools and help them become places where students can develop resilience to those pressures to consume, and lead the way through modelling through a low consumption culture in schools. The Schools Good Life Charter, it's a 2-year project, so we're about most of the way through year 1 now, and we're working closely with 6 secondary schools across Hammersmith and Fulham. So it's really nice way to work. We're working across one borough with lots of different schools, so they all feel like they're contributing to something bigger in their local community. So it's a really great borough-wide project. And the group of students in each school are developing a charter for their school that is all about thinking how in their school they can improve well-being while reducing consumption. So we didn't want this to be just about stop using so much stuff. It was also about actually how can we lead better lives, how can we be happier and healthier when using less stuff as well. And then the idea is we're delivering this in 6 schools in Hammersmith and Fulham, learning lots because this is the first time we've done it, and then pulling all those learnings into a how-to guide. So we will then make this available for free to schools all across the country. So we have a platform at Global Action Plan called Transform Our World, which is a teacher platform that teachers all across the UK can access, and so they will be able to deliver this in their own schools. So it will have a much greater UK-wide impact by the end of the project. So we will teach them how to deliver, how to implement the Schools Good Life Charter in their own schools. And then, so yeah, and also in the second half of the project, the schools in Hammersmith and Fulham who weren't part of those 6 original schools will also get the opportunity to take up the Schools Good Life Charter and be mentored by the schools currently doing it. And we'll be going out and presenting at education influencer events to try and promote this and get the education sector excited about it. So it's a partnership between Global Action Plan, which is us, an environmental charity, Hammersmith and Fulham Council, and the West London Schools Partnership, who are a partnership of schools all across West London who are doing work on environmental education. But also we're involving local businesses as well, and local kind of community projects to get involved too. So we don't just want it to be stuck within schools, but also influencing the wider community. And we're also hoping to get out and reach parents as well. So not just the students in schools, but parents too. So where are we at? So we've been delivering the workshops. So since September, since the start of term, we've been going into schools to groups of 15 students, and we've developed a series of 4 workshops which are designed to support students explore issues around consumption, explore ideas for change, and create their charter on improving well-being and consumption. And then those students are meeting as a group throughout the year to put their action plans into place. And we are kind of measuring the impact through a baseline and end of project survey. So just to give you a flavour of some of the initiatives that they've come up with so far. So they are still at the beginning really of just coming up with their ideas. So this is going to be running throughout the school year all the way through to June 2023 that they're doing this. But so far, the types of ideas they've come up with are, so one school came up with bringing more nature into their playground, bringing visible flower beds, more trees and more bird boxes. So good for nature and good for well-being of students by having more access to nature. Running an awareness campaign in the canteen about waste and where our food comes from and its impact on the environment. So think about consumption in terms of food, and the health of the food that we eat. So again, linking that kind of health of people and health of the planet together. Another school created a swap shop for clothes. So lowering consumption of clothing at schools, and think about how students can swap school uniforms and things, and as well as jackets and trainers and things, so they're not always having to buy new things, which is also obviously helpful in a cost of living crisis as well. So not feeling like always got to have kind of new stuff, and changing that culture to make it more normal and acceptable to be wearing pre-loved clothes at school. Having playground space for students to be active in when they arrive early, to prevent them from going to the shop out of boredom. So this was a really lovely one that a group of students came up with. They said, you know, when often there's a large group of students get to school early because their parents are dropping them off, and they've got to get out of the house before their parents go to work, and they're hanging around and bored. And what do when they're bored? They go to the shop. They go to the shop and buy chocolate bars and sweets and things that are not very good for them. And they recognise how much they really do just kind of consume out of boredom. So having that kind of playground space open to them in the morning, so they could maybe have a game of football instead, I think is a really lovely example of what we're trying to do here, of encouraging those kind of better well-being activities instead of just those consumption activities. Another school came up with designating space in their hall and running awareness initiatives to promote how happier and more sustainable lives. So the model we've been using with them is the 5 ways to well-being, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but it's kind of connect, stay active, keep learning, and what's the other? Take notice and give. So I always forget the take notice, that's one I always forget. But anyway, ways of living that are genuinely good for our well-being. So looking at how they can bring more and more of that into our schools. They wanted to kind of share that learning with their whole school. And kind of linked to that, they wanted to bring in movement breaks throughout the day. So not so linked to consumption, but very much linked to their well-being. One of the things they came up with in their groups was how much they sit still at school all day and they want to get up and move more. So what does success look like? So this is what we're measuring. So at an individual level, we're measuring the students' levels of, we're measuring their compassionate values, and we want to see an increase in those, because we're not just teaching them about the well-being of themselves, but the well-being of their community and of each other, and how to take care of each other more. We'll be measuring the low consumption behaviour change, leading to reduced embedded and direct carbon emissions. So for each specific project, they'll be doing something that will be reducing their carbon impact. And we're going to be measuring well-being in young people and hoping to see an improvement. At the school community level, we want to see increased conversations about consumption. So this might be things like through assemblies, or it might be through parents' evenings, it might be through letters going out to parents, etc. And we want to see a really strong commitment to culture change throughout the school, so not just within the group of students we're working with. And then beyond the school and the wider school, we also want to help show to other schools and within the local community to have an increased understanding of why and how schools can become those beacons of lower consumption.
1 minute left, Natasha.
Oh, okay. Quick 3 learnings so far. I'm just going to give you those very quickly. So just anything working with young people, such an important thing is that they have that agency to choose the issues that they care about. So we found, and we'd love to talk to the influencer group from Glimpse, because this is something that young people have really identified of, like, where they are influenced to consume is through influencers and through social media. So it would be really fantastic to link them in with more positive influencers and teach them that, help them see that influencers aren't just about selling them things, but giving them their voice and letting them choose is so important. Working with schools is really, really tough. They're so busy, they've got so many priorities, so really giving teachers that support is absolutely vital. And we've given them eco-anxiety training from a professional psychotherapist to also help them cope with talking about these big topics with students and helping them understand how they can support their students. And then finally, kind of that community collaboration. So just to give you an example, we've already connected one of the schools with the new youth swap shop, who are going to be supporting them to think about their project where they're having a swap shop in their school. So linking them to those wider community projects as well, and bringing them together to kind of share their learnings and inspirations from each other. And that is it. I will wrap up. There's our contact details if you want to follow us.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Natasha. So 4 fantastic presentations there from 4 very different projects. We're now going to go into a break. So we're going to kick off again very sharply at 11:10. So if you can be back just a minute or so before that, because I will be opening the breakout groups when we come back. And if over your cup of tea or coffee, you can just have a think about which one of those 5 breakouts you want to join. So stay on the call. You can just turn your camera off if you want to while you leave your desk. And if we see you back here, let's aim for 8 minutes past 11 to be back here so that the breakouts can start promptly at 10 past. And a huge thank you to all our speakers. See you all in a moment. Thanks. No, Rennie, you're all good, I think. Just, yeah, I'm going to go and grab a quick cup of tea and I'll be back in 10 minutes.
Lovely. Cheers. one of the things was making sure that you're asking for people's accessibility requirements at an early stage for engaging in climate action. And once you've asked and been told, ensuring that you are actually able to deliver on that. The next one was not necessarily starting the talking point about climate change and climate action, but connecting on issues that are relevant and important to disabled people. And then the last one, which was a lesson learned from Bristol, which Amy was saying they had a budget for accessibility, which was felt early on to be generous, but as the project has developed, realizing that actually that's not sufficient. So ensuring that you build that in at the start and it is realistic, and if necessary, that you make the case to funders of the need, if additional funding is needed, to genuinely engage with disabled people as the project develops. So they were the highlights. I hope that's okay for the group.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Rona. We'll rattle through these so we don't eat into the presentation time. So if we move next on to Cumbria, and Shona, would you like to share some highlights from your group?
Yeah, so we covered a lot of ground. We had lots of questions around climate outreach, relationship building. So Karen and John spoke about communicating with transparency, finding those shared visions, and how they kind of balance the sticking with principles and the importance of listening really as a key mechanism for that influence. And we had a number of questions around food and waste. So John and Karen shared some of their working practices and key organisations that they worked with, and organisations that they've learned from as well in that. And also a bit of activity around how they deliver climate literacy and spread this and deliver it with authenticity. I think one of the key things for me was looking at, Karen spoke about how they're looking to stratify their partnership membership. So, identifying those differences in capacity and resources. So some of the partners looking for more support, some of them looking to contribute staff or funding, and some in real influential positions, and how they kind of map that so that people understand what they're bringing and the level of commitment.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, Shona. And then on to group 3, which was Leeds, and that was Emily facilitating.
Yeah, so we did move around quite a few subjects as well. We started off talking about the food strategy that Leeds are developing, and I think it's what really came out of that is how long a process it's been to get to the point of actually creating that strategy, and that is years and years of kind of engagement and consultation with the community to get to the point that the city can actually come together and create a strategy, and then how multi-layered that strategy is. In terms of, Sarah talked about food resilience and how the pandemic had shown how fragile this was within the city, and that is becoming prevalent again with the cost of living crisis and the demand on things like community pantries. So that strategy is looking at all of access to all of those kind of things, and to land to grow food, accessing healthy food. And then we moved into talking about cooking and waste and how that links in with composting, and about creating, I think Leeds said they've got a recipe hub as well. So there was quite a lot of interest in the different layers and the different links that having a food strategy kind of move into in terms of climate action. We also, from that, we then went on to talk about consultation and how you do that successfully, and that there is no one size fits all answer to that, unfortunately. Something that's been worked really well for Leeds is actually having a clickable link that asks simple questions, and that they've managed to get that out quite wide through their partnership socials and their own socials, and that is working quite well to engage people on a certain level. And we also talked about citizens' assemblies, which is something that happened prior to the Leeds project as it's set up now, but it's where a lot of this work has stemmed from. And some of the other people in the breakout are considering that or have considered that. And so we did talk about kind of the pros and cons of citizens' assemblies and then maybe more informal models if that quite structured and research-based citizens' assembly doesn't work for you. And Sarah did highlight the need to have really a higher education establishment on board to help with that research element if you're going to go down the citizens' assembly. And Eleanor, who was in the breakout group, has agreed to kind of share because they've done a lot of thinking around citizens' assembly and did eventually decide to move away from that model. So she is going to share that thinking, which we will then post on Slack after this. I think that might be helpful to other people who are thinking around that particular model at the moment.
Brilliant, thanks Emily. And just to say, so I know in terms of the sort of cost of living crisis, at our last coffee morning, so for those that haven't been to one of our coffee mornings, we do a Zoom coffee morning once a month. You don't have to register for that. There's a link, you can just show up, drop in, we'll share a link. I don't know if Shona's able to just share the link to that in the chat. Do come along to that. There was a request at the last one for a particular breakout to discuss cost of living crisis. So that will, I think our next one is on the 5th of December, but we'll share the link to that. And just bear in mind that that's a useful forum to carry on any of these discussions, as is Slack. Okay, on to our fourth group. So that was Global Action Plan and Schools, and that was Aggie from Social Change Agency facilitating. So over to you, Aggie.
Thank you. Yeah, we had a really great discussion. We talked a lot about engaging both schools and families and in the classroom and kind of getting into that, getting into the school network. And we came up with some tangible resources, such as the Transform Our World network of teachers, which was really nice. We also looked at the kind of evaluation side of the project and talked about how it was looking at the impact on values of young people and the kind of change on impact of values using the same surveys at the beginning and then at the end of the project, but also about using evaluation as a kind of a skills resource and helping young people to take ownership and control over that aspect of the project and build it in themselves. Which was really good. And then at the end, we had a really nice kind of group thinking discussion where everyone was inputting about ideas of how to engage with parents and kind of wider communities, especially when lots of the project work is around or quite focused within schools and focused at young people, how to kind of build outwards. And we also talked about using networks, having kind of community events, and we did a little bit of networking within the group. And I know some contacts have been shared and some ideas for collaborations have possibly come up, which was really nice. And I've shared the Jamboard in the chat, I think. So everyone should be able to see it if you want to look at the notes.
Fabulous, thanks Aggie, and we'll share those Jamboard outputs via the resources library as well after this session. And last but not least, so Glimpse and their breakout session on working with influencers. So Batsaba, are you going to feedback from your group?
I believe Ruth has this one, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I can do that, Batsaba. I've got the Jamboard here. I'll just drop it into the notes. We had a great discussion. We were joined by Gabby and Gemma again, so great to hear from their experience. We spoke about like the most successful collaborations with influencers and CAF groups being when there was a sense of shared value. So it made sense that they would be partnering, but they're also the potential to speak beyond the CAF group's existing audience. So yeah, it was really great to hear like how successful that was for Camden Fixing Factory and Gabby. But we also know that it is quite an experimental way of working, and other groups have taken part. Like it's not been quite so clean a journey, with some influencers dropping out along the way. And it is a high risk kind of way of working, that those kind of things happen, particularly when working with smaller budgets. And we had a really interesting discussion actually about pay and what was a good rate for a local influencer, but also sometimes people offering to do things for free, and how that can be a little bit of a false economy, because actually when people offer work for free, as one of the groups found, it was very easy for them to drop out because there was no contract and there was no it kept getting pushed down the pile of priorities, which is understandable. So we had some conversations around that. And then we also spoke about some practical tips of like working out who is a useful influencer to work with, and checking that their followers aren't just paid for. Sometimes you can get swept away in sort of big numbers and metrics that actually aren't that useful to you. Like, it's far better to have a deep engagement with people within your community than, you know, a shiny person that actually, it doesn't matter if their followers know what you're up to. Yeah, it was a great discussion.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Ruth. I'm now being completely blinded by sunshine coming through my window. It's quite a nice problem to have. Yeah, as I say, I hope those discussions were useful, and great to hear there's some networking going on and some contacts being shared. Just to plug again for please adding your details to our partnership database if you'd be happy for other CAF projects to get in touch with you. We shared the link at the beginning, we'll share it again at the end. The only way we can get you to kind of share each other's contact details is through that forum. We can't do it directly for you. So it'd be great if you could add your details to that. Fabulous. Okay, so now on to the final part of today's agenda. I'm delighted to welcome our guest speaker for today, Josh Cockcroft from Climate Spring. So Josh is going to be telling us about how stories can change the world and the power of narrative as a tool for the climate movement. And I'm very excited to hear his presentation. So over to you, Josh.
Hi everyone, let me just get myself set up. Emma, can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you loud and clear.
Good start.
You can see your slides, but they've still got the notes on the
yeah,
that's perfect. Perfect.
Cool, great, let's give this a go. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. I'm Josh Cockcroft, Director of Climate Spring. Climate Spring is a non-profit organisation that promotes and supports fictional film and TV projects about the climate crisis. We launched at the beginning of this year, kind of sponsored by the lottery, and I'll tell you a bit more about our approach later on. I want to set the scene by telling you a bit of a story. Let me take you back about 70 years to 1948. To those of you who don't remember those halcyon days, basking in a post-Second World War glow, the NHS had just had its very first patient, bread has just come off rationing, and you can now buy enough petrol to take you 90 miles a month. Over the pond, the oil industry has continued to boom, and for the first time ever is producing 5,000 barrels a day. The Seven Sisters, those 7 oil companies who dominated the mid-20th century, ruled the roost and already gained a key understanding of the importance of advertising in their work. But while this is boom time, all was not well for them. The first Pulitzer Prize ever for environmental reporting had gone to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and the fossil fuel industry set up the Smoke and Fumes Committee, perhaps the first ever oil industry committee specifically set up to head on to address environmental concerns and critiques they were receiving. Beyond the concerns about air quality, there was an increasing concern about the environmental damage done directly through drilling to the natural landscape, not least in the coastal wetlands of the Louisiana Bayou. This is a problem. Domestic drilling in the US was still hugely profitable, and the move to offshore was only just beginning. So Standard Oil put their thinking caps on, opened the branding, lit up some cigars, I'm filling in some gaps here, and hit upon a brilliant idea. How can we reach millions of people? How can we convince them that our way of thinking, that drilling for oil is absolutely, totally harmless, is correct? These were men, and they were men, who had just lived and experienced the propaganda machine of the Second World War, and film had been a key part of that. Casablanca did a lot to turn the Americans off the French, and so the Don Drapers of Standard Oil commissioned a film, thinking this was a great idea, about a poor boy and his pet raccoon, and the wonderful things that happened that oilmen came and set up a drilling rig round the corner from his house. The film, directed by Robert Flaherty, one of the many dubious characters hanging out in Hollywood at that time, and indeed now, won an Oscar and a Pulitzer. It was a massive commercial success. The film, The Louisiana Story, was pure fiction, but it was a compelling narrative with a super cute raccoon, hitting all of the key emotional points you need to bring your audience with you, and underlying it all was the key message. It's a good thing when the oilmen come to start drilling in your backyard. This was, in many ways, the starting gun for the oil industry's 70-year campaign to harness culture for their own ends. The oil industry has known all too well for years the importance of culture to sway the public, and they haven't stopped. Their expertise was put to great effect when one of the teams at Exxon modeled, quite accurately, the probable impact of climate change to the dangers of fossil fuels. Top dogs weren't a huge fan of this, and while they thought to themselves, maybe there might be something in it, and started to take steps to guard themselves against rising sea levels, while simultaneously publicly questioning any research lending itself to the idea of climate change, they also invested in raising their oil rigs to account for sea level rises. The interest of oil, and with that climate change, has been cultural battleground most of us don't really notice ever since. And the fossil fuel companies have been winning the war. They've controlled the narrative for the last 80 years, and that's only really just beginning to change. People question sometimes just how important narrative is to the climate crisis, that surely there are other priorities. But the fact is that we have the science, we have the arguments, we have the tools, and even much of the technology. What we don't have really is the willingness of a broader society to make the difficult, inconvenient decisions that means we can save ourselves in the time frame that we have. The climate movement has tried, a lot of the climate movement has been based around using facts and arguments. We hope that educating people will get them to change their ways, the premise of the information deficit model. But on a whole, people aren't changing their behavior, or they're not changing it fast enough. In fact, there's increasing evidence that the doom and gloom reporting on the crisis is causing despondency and disengagement. About 50% of individuals in the UK feel hopeless about the issue and that they can do little about it. The problem comes down to efficacy belief. Efficacy belief is the measure of people's confidence that they can exert personal control on an issue. Individuals believe they cannot do anything about climate change, won't do anything about climate change. Low efficacy beliefs compounded with high risk levels, such as the collapse of civilization, can result in people implementing denial-based coping strategies to reduce their fear and stress. So here we are. The bad guys are closing in, our heroes at their lowest ebb, but all is not lost. We have a crucial tool, one of which the fossil fuels make great use of already: stories. As a species, we've been telling stories for about 100,000 years. Logical and argumentative forms of information structures only emerged about 5,000 years ago, and in that 95,000 year head start, our brains have been become pretty hardwired for story structure as a way of kind of absorbing information. Researchers studying the mental process of babies have confirmed that we are born programmed to search for and to create meaning from story elements. We use these hardwired concepts to predict what the world will be like, and so to act on it effectively. Childhood reinforces this predisposition for a heavy use of stories. Our earliest encounter of explanation comes in the form of stories told to us by our parents. From the beginning of our language acquisition, we must learn to construct our own story fragments in response to our parents' questioning of our actions. We've all had the experience of being moved by a story. A good story has the power to engage us, take us out of our surroundings, and entirely alter how we feel. It has the power to make us laugh, make us cry, and everything in between. But how is it that a story about characters we know are fictional and events that never happened manage to engage us if this were a story ourselves, as if we were in the story ourselves? When you begin to engage with a story, your brain releases oxytocin. Oxytocin encourages you to act positively towards other people, and is released when people act positively towards you. Oxytocin is the hormonal mechanism that enables humans to maintain themselves as part of social groups. When we begin to engage a story, oxytocin is released, giving us empathetic feelings towards the characters in the story. If you do not empathize, then oxytocin is not released. As the story engages us, we continue to release oxytocin and increasingly transport it into the fictional world. Information received during narrative transportation is received very differently from when information is presented to us in a logical framework. When we undergo narrative transportation, the mind becomes focused on the events of the story and reality fades into the background. In contrast, when we're consciously processing information, our brains are still accessing pre-existing ideas, experience, and opinions, and we can engage critically with the information. Narrative transportation, stimulated by the release of oxytocin, prevents you from that critical engagement. Because of this, stories have a greater power to make you engage with novel ideas or opinions than information presented in other structures. This willingness to believe that the characters that you've grown to love is the same mechanism by which you're likely to be for your husband when he swears blind he's not running a Ponzi scheme despite the police at the door. When the story is finished and we're safely transported back to reality, the ideas and emotions that were imparted to us during the journey remain. We're more likely to make decisions which are story consistent, such as donating to a domestic violence shelter or calling a hotline after watching Made, the hit Netflix series. These effects will be demonstrated to last for 6 weeks to 3 months without further reinforcement and become embedded the more it gets repeated. Stories have an immense power to change the world, and we are a crucial tool for us in the zero climate crisis. For Climate Spring, our focus on utilising the most effective and broad-reaching story to ever devised, the screen. We work to develop and promote scripted stories of mainstream appeal about climate change that has the power to engage audiences positively. We do minimal dystopian horror about who are all going to be murdering each other over the last bagel in Sainsbury's as the city becomes submerged, and more about the kind of world we want to build. Family dramas about people changing how they farm, or a sitcom about idealistic MP trying to save a community garden. We want to positively engage people with what they can do about the climate crisis, and stories are the perfect medium for us to do this. We're at a crucial junction in the climate crisis. The world is changing, and despite our knowledge and ingenuity, as COP27 has amply demonstrated, we are seemingly unable to do the things that are really necessary. We need to shift the dial, move the culture, and bring the world along with us. Narratives, be they blockbuster feature film, a compelling explanation of our work, or a brilliant campaign, are the crucial tool we need to make that happen. We need to write the story about how we'll win the climate crisis and win. Thank you very much for listening. If you're at all interested in finding out more about how stories work, then please have a look, or about our work, and please look at climate-spring.org. And otherwise, very happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Josh. That's absolutely fascinating and slightly close to the bone, because fighting people over the last bagel in Sainsbury's is my recurring nightmare, basically. Would you be so kind as to share links to your organisation and any social media links in the chat, just so it's easy for people to sign up to follow
Absolutely.
things? That would be fabulous. And we have got another 10 minutes or so. So does anybody have any questions for Josh? Or would you like to pick his brains or anything? Or is there anything you'd like to share from your own experiences of telling and sharing climate stories? Dermot, I can see you've got your hand up. Fire away.
Yeah, I've put in the, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm just putting in the chat that we've been approached by a production company that's interested in potentially developing and pitching a thing about fixing factories to a major TV show. But obviously they're mostly going to be about entertainment, or possibly making a new version of the repair shop. So I'm wondering what the opportunities are for taking something that we're doing and getting it on the kind of national stage, but also telling the stories that will make differences to people and can change the narrative, as you mentioned. So
Yes. I mean, from our perspective, part of our work and what we do is working directly with companies who are interested in working and stuff in the space, and trying to consult them to try and make sure the stories they're telling or interested in telling already are the best version from our climate messaging perspective that we can possibly do. So I'd be really happy and up for chatting with you, Dermot, if you want to connect after this directly about what you're talking about. The fact is that and part of the reason why we exist as well is to try and act as a bit of a conduit between climate organisations and screen industries, who are a very exclusive, internally focused, commercially minded bunch. And with all the love in the world, I say that to them. But they are not it's not the easiest industry to break into or to try to get a project through with. And part of what we're interested in doing is to try and talk to people like yourselves about the work that you're doing, the work you're doing in your communities and the various means you're running, and to try and see how we can help essentially pitch that and fashion that in a way which was digestible and hopefully of interest to the people who can then take that to a wider audience. So if any of you are interested and think there's something like, then please do get in touch with us. And Rachel has kindly offered a correct link to our own website, so thank you very much for that. Please do get in touch.
Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks, Josh. Natasha, you've got a question.
You've sort of just answered it, but yeah, I suppose my question is, what do you think kind of storytellers need in order to be able to kind of tell those more positive stories? Because yeah, I think we've spoken to you before. And for Global Action Plan, we've done a lot of work as well, looking into because we kind of identified that so many of the stories told that are linked to the climate crisis are the doom stories, are the stories of how bad it is. And it can be really hard to tell the more positive story of, like, well, what does the world look like if we do solve this? What, I suppose, because it's easier to tell. And feedback we got was that, you know, that often writers, you know, there's so much more story in the dystopia because that's where the drama is, and that's where the kind of you know, the narratives, it's an easier story to tell. So I suppose my question is really like, what can the environmental sector do? And I'm talking that as a huge, you know, so many people here doing different things. What can we do to help kind of storytellers, and whether that's in TV or film, to help them tell that those more positive stories? What do you think they need from us?
So I think this is a really interesting problem, and I mean, so I find it really fascinating that writers whose entire and producers whose entire job is to find interesting stories and try to put that on screen in a way that which is going to be commercially compelling, have really been struggling to work out a way of conceptualizing how to talk about the climate crisis. Hence, you end up with Don't Look Up, which is an interesting film for many ways and takes very much the broadest picture view, does a brilliant job of making a film about climate change, does not once mention climate, and has a whole host of issues which I'm sure we all have strong opinions about. But anyway, I think that the problem is that writers, producers, I think, struggle to find a human way into it. Good stories are about characters and about understanding who actual individuals, actual people that are kind of working in this space and what they're doing, what they, you know, this isn't about airing your dirty laundry and project or what you tell your therapist, but it is about making yourself, I think it is about individuals who come across very much as human. I think this is why Greta, for one, has been kind of very much kind of come to the, has part of the reason why she kind of came to the fore, she very much comes across as a human being who cares about this rather than just a spokesperson repeating the science. And I think that there's an aspect to which, and I think that's an aspect to which I think that is the key point to focus on. Writers and producers are desperately unoriginal. They mine what's going on in the news and content for ideas of what they're going to make, partly because they think that's what people are interested in, and in this case, I think they're right. But they will base it off what they know. And so at the moment, to give a sense, over the last year, we've received 100, you know, over 100 submissions. I'd say from kind of established writers, I'd say maybe 60% of those have actually been about activists, XR types, that kind of thing, and people working in that way. And the reason why they've been focusing on that is because there's a very, very clear human dimension about human drama and foibles and the problem with that. The problem, but I think there's so many interesting stories that can be told about the problems of rewilding a farm or regenerative farming, or the difficulties of putting up a wind farm in a particular area, because these are all still human stories. They have effects on human people. They are, you know, very much set in the communities that they're working in. And I feel that sometimes that human dimension gets a little bit lost in the wider picture of we're trying to tackle, you know, we need to get to 1.5 degrees, which is factually obviously entirely true. But I think the translation needs to have that human dimension. I think that's the difficulty.
Super, thanks, Josh. And one last question from Colleen, who she's popped it in the chat, which is around the role of evidence in storytelling and narrative. So she says, when we talk about stories, people often think about fiction. Have you seen examples, or have you got any examples of how evidence and research can be used well in storytelling?
So this is an interesting one, and I mean, there's a whole range of ways that you can use evidence and research, and which can be used badly or well. I think, you know, on the documentary side, there are some absolutely brilliant narrative films which kind of take on a compelling right. My favorite one is randomly The Square, which is an Oscar-nominated film about the Egyptian Revolution made in 2013, which is a fact which very much focused on a handful of human people in the midst of this very complex political environment, which I think by the end of that 100 minutes of watching, you do have a good sense of what's going on, but really you really feel and understand the problems of the characters involved. But meanwhile, they're telling you a lot about Egyptian politics, and you're much more versed in what's going on after the fact. Another good example on the fiction side is Big Short, which essentially cheat it by using a lot of kind of lectured excerpts, which are kind of very cleverly written, but essentially very much like, here's how the fun industry works, dump that on you, and then let's get on with the character story. But that can also work quite well. But I think that for the most part, I think the best versions of this in fiction, at least, are where actually the research and evidence is worn quite lightly, where you're not being necessarily lectured at, where characters are acting in a way which is consistent with their evidence or research, or trying to do something on that basis, and they're trying to action something. Or, you know, they're trying to specifically overcome misinformation campaign. I mean, legal dramas are very good at this, a way of kind of literally showing up kind of like the truth of the matter or the lie of the matter, depending on what's going on. So yeah, I think it is difficult, but I think the best examples often you don't necessarily realize you're being given the digest of some academic research.
Fabulous. Huge thanks, Josh. And just a reminder, we will share Josh's slides by the Resources Library. We've also recorded it. I'm actually just going to stop the recording now.